So here's something nobody wants to admit. The best anime protagonists you've ever loved weren't built in training arcs. They weren't built in power-up sequences or montages where they get stronger and the music gets louder. They were built in their absolute worst moments, on their knees with nothing left. And today, we're going to talk about why. Because the authors we love the most, Oda, Akutami, Tappei, they're not putting their characters through hell for shock value. There's a reason. 3 case studies, 1 massive subversion at the end, and I promise you this changes how you watch anime forever. Alright, let's start with my boy Luffy, because his whole thing, his whole reason for existing as a character is freedom and protecting the people around him. That's the core of who he is from chapter 1. He doesn't want a throne, he doesn't want power for power's sake. He wants to be free, and he wants everyone he cares about to be free with him. Clean, simple, beautiful. But here's where Oda is genuinely ruthless. The Sabayori Archipelago arc exists for one reason: to show Luffy exactly how worthless this identity is when you don't have the strength to back it up. Bartholomew Kuma shows up and just starts picking off straw hats one by one. Zoro disappears, Nami disappears, Robin, Usopp, Sanji, gone. One after another. And Luffy can't do a single thing. He's standing right there, watching every person he loves get erased right in front of him. And he's completely, totally powerless. The guy who fights for freedom can't protect the freedom of a single person he loves. That contradiction is the whole point. And then Oda immediately follows it up with Marineford. So now Luffy breaks into Impel Down, the most secure prison on the planet by the way, runs through admirals, fights through an entire war. He does things in that arc that should be impossible, and he does them all for one reason: to save Ace. Best believe the man left everything on the table, and Ace still dies, right there in Luffy's arms. That loss doesn't just hurt him, it shuts him down completely. The cheerful, reckless, rubber-brained captain just stops functioning. He goes catatonic on a beach on Amazon Lily, and starts destroying everything around him because his body doesn't know what else to do. The version of Luffy we spent hundreds of episodes with, that version is gone. And what grows back in its place is something completely different. Someone who understands, for the first time, what it actually costs to be the kind of person people follow. Because here's the thing, suffering for Luffy is the price of freedom. Not a training exercise, not a lesson in a classroom, a debt paid in real loss. You can't genuinely fight for something until you've felt exactly what it means to have it taken away. The man who inspires entire fleets of pirates to follow him without hesitation is the man who once sat on a beach unable to stand, because he learned firsthand what powerlessness actually feels like. One thing had to happen before the other. There was no other way. Now Yuji Itadori starts Jujutsu Kaisen with one of the clearest moral codes in all of shonen. Give people a proper death. Protect others. Don't let anyone die in front of you if you can stop it. Simple, clean, the kind of moral code a good kid builds when he watches his grandfather pass away with dignity. It's honestly kind of beautiful how straightforward it is. And then Akutami takes that code and just systematically dismantles it. Every arc, every fight. Because every time Sukuna uses Yuji's body to kill someone, Yuji didn't pull the trigger, but he handed over the gun. He knows this. And that knowledge stacks up. Every single death, every single face, until Yuji arrives at this deeply heartbreaking conclusion. He's not a person with a mission. He's a cog, a tool. Something that absorbs damage so other people don't have to. Most protagonists take pain and convert it into power, right? New form, new technique, bigger explosion. Yuji takes pain and converts it into philosophy. And that philosophy is that his own life genuinely matters less than everyone else's. That's not weakness. It's not him being dramatic. It's the actual logical conclusion he reached after watching suffering happen through his own hands one too many times. The suffering in JJK doesn't forge a hero chasing glory. It forges someone who already wrote themselves out of the story, who keeps fighting purely so others get to stay in it. And I'm not going to lie, family, that hits different than any power-up ever could. So Luffy loses people, and Yuji loses his sense of self-worth. But Subaru Natsuki from Re:Zero takes it somewhere genuinely darker than either of those. And I need you to understand why before I explain the subversion. Subaru's ability is called Return by Death. Every time he dies, he snaps back to a checkpoint and gets to try again. Sounds like a cheat code, right? Sounds like the most busted protagonist power in isekai history. Except he keeps every single memory of every death. Every time he drowns, gets gutted, watches someone he loves die right in front of him, that's permanent. It lives in him, and the power forbids him from telling anyone about it. So he carries every single one of those deaths completely alone, over and over, smiling at people who have no idea he's already watched them die 20 times. The Witch's Cult arc is where that weight finally becomes too heavy to fake. Subaru dies so many times in so many brutal ways that he just stops being able to hold himself together. And there's this scene. He's on his knees in the and he begs Emilia to save him. Not to fight with him, not to trust his plan, to save him. He completely collapses. That scene matters more than any battle in the series because it's the first time Subaru stops performing. Every layer of the "I'm the protagonist, I've got this" fantasy gets burned off. And what you see underneath is a terrified kid who's been drowning in silence for so long, he forgot what the surface looks like. Re:Zero is specifically engineered to do that. It takes every cool isekai protagonist trait and exposes it as a coping mechanism. The arrogance, the self-appointed heroism, the obsessive need to fix everything, all of it is a mask. And suffering is the only thing that gets hot enough to melt it. What's left after that? Someone who chooses to keep going not because he's special, but because he refuses to let the people he loves end up in a timeline where he quit. That's not a power fantasy. That's a real person. And it took a psychological collapse to get there. Now here's where everything we talked about flips. Thorfinn from Vinland Saga starts his story as a child defined entirely by one thing: revenge. His father got murdered, and from that moment, every single choice he makes points at one man. He trains, he fights, he kills. He survives situations that should finish him, and eventually he gets exactly what he wanted. And it means absolutely nothing. He's empty. The thing that organized his entire existence is gone. And there's nothing underneath it, because he never built anything to hold it up. Revenge was the whole structure. Then comes the slave arc. And this is where the show gets genuinely brutal in a way that's different from anything Luffy or Yuji go through. Thorfinn doesn't just lose a fight or watch someone die. He loses his name, his purpose, his weapons, his identity as a warrior. He's stripped down to nothing, forced to work as property, and given no enemy to point his rage at. And that emptiness, that total absence of a target, is the first moment in his life where the real Thorfinn has any room to exist at all. He comes out the other side with one conclusion: he has no enemies. And I want to be clear about what that means, because it sounds soft, but it absolutely is not. For a person shaped from childhood by violence, choosing to believe you have no enemies is one of the hardest things a human being can do. It's not weakness. It's a philosophy that costs everything. This is the subversion, family. Luffy's suffering makes him a better protector. Yuji's suffering makes him a more selfless fighter. Subaru's suffering makes him a more honest person. All of them still operates within the cycle. More strength, more sacrifice, more fighting. Thorfinn uses his suffering to walk away from the cycle entirely. He doesn't become a better weapon. He becomes someone who refuses to be a weapon at all. And that's the answer to the whole question. Authors put protagonists through hell because comfort never forces a character to choose who they actually are. Only loss does that. Only the moment where everything fake gets stripped away. So tell me in the comments section which protagonist suffering hit you the hardest and why. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, click on this one that just popped up, and I will see you on the next one.